Hello, and welcome to the Gnosis and Science Podcast, Ep.7. In this episode, we will look at how our subconscious shapes reality on a subatomic level, affecting everything we manifest for each individual in a cascading effect from the microscopic to the macroscopic. And we will look at elementary particles that serve as the building blocks of physics and reality, and how our observation and understanding of self alters their structures. So first, there's the weak nuclear force, which is responsible for radioactive decay. Now, this is when the particles will change their fundamental structure with what are known as quarks. There are up quarks and down quarks. And this is the equivalent of a soul changing, as we either repress or bring to light subconscious patterns. It's a fundamental shift in orientation. And this is where the cascading domino effect is first started. Now, there are three quarks that make up protons and neutrons, having either a up or downward spin and orientation. The up quarks have a charge of plus 2/3, and a downward has a charge of minus 1/3. With two up and one downward facing quark, we are making a proton. And then with two downward and one upward oriented quark, we're creating a neutron, with each of these quarks being labeled as red, green, or blue. And they are constantly shifting these colors and essentially positions due to a messenger particle called a gluon strand. And each of these strands acts in between each of these quarks. And note these quarks are actually much smaller than a photon, so there's no way to actually have them produce color. Color in this context is just a useful way to distinguish between the three. Now, these gluon strands are the same strings mentioned in ADS-CFT string theory that go between 2D branes and serve as the karmic cords that change how our subconscious processes information. So we are severing the energetic bonds that bind us to certain timelines as we cut these cords, allowing us to ascend up the scale in varying axes, which is in turn affecting the probability and subatomic collapse through subconscious observation. Our subconscious actually changes the orientation of the either up or downward orientation of this third quark. This we can see mirrored in the Trinity structure with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but also really any Trinitarian structure and in religion, with the masculine and feminine, and the final quark being either up or down, determining either proton or a neutron, being based on our subconscious understanding of self. And once this happens, the proton, if it shifts to a neutron, or a neutron to a proton, will actually cause a cascading effect where there's a photon that is released, where energy is released. And we can look at the electromagnetic force that's being created by the exchange of virtual photons between charged particles, with like particles repelling and opposite ones attracting. And they're called virtual photons, as they don't obey normal energy momentum relations and exist only as mathematical descriptions of force carriers. They're just calculation tools. So we can, however, see the actual photons released as electromagnetic radiation or light. Now, there's the weak nuclear force, which is created when photons change to neutrons and vice versa, which I just talked about. So, as a positive 2/3 charge upward oriented quark changes to a negatively charged downward -1/3 quark, it creates a W plus boson, which will then decay into a neutron and a positron. So this process is called beta plus decay, while the inverse of a neutron converting to a positron releases a W minus boson, which then decays into an electron and an antineutrino. Now, this decay process is what's responsible for hydrogen forming helium and nuclear fusion in stars, as well as nuclear fission, where larger atoms break down into smaller ones. So, along with photons being released and electrons changing their energy level, going from one orbital to the next, based on whatever their energy is when they catch one of these photons that gets created as the orientation of these quarks change. We can see how this is, again, the soul is going from one density to another, or going up or down the scale invariant axis within ADS-CFT string theory, and also that this is the same process to where people have like auras and they change color. Eventually this manifests to where it can be seen with a naked eye through a glowing halo of light around the crown of the person's head. So this happens as their level of coherence and self actually bends and fragments physical reality around them. So just like how the electromagnetic force, while strong, can never overcome the strong nuclear force, the people that we attract into our lives is to mirror back at us what we don't see about ourselves on a subconscious level, due to either positive or negative polarity of expression of our unintegrated shadow, and positive or negative aspects that we're just blind to about ourselves. So we can never actually have others take our sovereignty or our free will to choose unless we allow them. There might be external circumstances, like, let's say someone breaks into your house and puts a gun to your head or something, or you're in some sort of circumstance where you could say, oh, well, no, I didn't have a choice. That's the thing. We always have a choice with free will and self-sovereignty. And again, these forces, it's a bit extreme, sorry, but it's true. On a more mundane level, this could be us just giving away our free will by staying small, or not authentically expressing or voicing ourselves to appease other people. So again, these forces aren't just helpful analogies, but a physical manifestation of the same principle, playing out at different scales, being viewed as separate due to the fragmentation process of ideas and concepts as they descend from source or higher densities, realities, or dimensions. Now, the last theorized particle that physicists have been trying to find is the graviton. But as we've already touched on, this theorized particle that is responsible for gravity has not been detected as of now, and may not actually be a fundamental part of physics. There's, within my framework, the characteristics of objects such as mass and our physical reality and their warping of space-time is a direct reflection and is proportional to the higher reality form of that consciousness and their level of self-understanding. As again, according to ADS-CFT string theory, when you write string length expressed as a separate dimension, you get the wave equation of a graviton. Now, the string length representing the energetic strength of the bond of the connection between the 2D brain structures, and severing these strings is happening on a subconscious level within a slightly more curved, non-linear space-time. Now we'll look at how working through subconscious trauma actually alters our electromagnetic field and the flux, thereby altering the phase of electron wave functions before they're actually measured. This leads to an altered probability and eventually the manifestation of miracles of electrons on a small scale. So in the Aharonova-Bohm experiment, this showed that there are what are known as electromagnetic potentials, and they are significant in quantum mechanics and even in areas where the field is not present. So in this experiment, they had a solenoid that is just a coiled wire with a current running through it, which generates a magnetic field. But past where this field ends is an area of potential. So it's not an electromagnetic field, but it is an area of potential, a vector that has an effect on the phase of a wave function before it is measured. So the solenoid actually generates an electromagnetic field but keeps it contained, and we can see that as electrons have a dual wave and particle characteristics, as it's actually a wave until it is measured, and then it turns into a particle. This particle has a certain probability of appearing in a certain range around the nucleus of an atom, creating what we call orbitals or shells. They're not just a stable ring-like structure. It's more of an area of probability. And they found that when they shot a beam of light around this solenoid and the electromagnetic field that is contained by the solenoid, so even though it didn't actually interact with the electromagnetic field, the potential vector that is created by this electromagnetic field that they all create, including our own, caused a noticeable and measurable shift in the collapse of the electron waveform. With a stronger flux from this field, it creates a larger shift. So flux is just the amount of electromagnetic field that is being produced, the intensity. So in the center, when you look at a toroidal field and you see those lines going through the center, just think more of those lines. It's like trying to catch rain in a bucket. Depending on the amount of rain, you're going to catch more in the bucket. However much of that water passes through the rim of the bucket, that's your flux. So it is the strength of the electromagnetic field, and this increases as we process subconscious into conscious awareness. So as we're working through this trauma and rising along the scale invariant axis and raising our subconscious frequency generates a stronger field and a greater flux, which causes a greater alteration of the potential, ultimately altering the wave function and the ability for one to manifest to a greater and greater degree. Is everything already exists either in this timeline or an alternate timeline or in the higher realm of thoughts and ideas. So you can see how some people are really good at manifesting. Everyone's good at manifesting. We always do it, but some people are good at doing it through an act of will, and some people less so. So everything we can eventually bring into reality as long as we are consistent. And this leads to eventually being able to alter reality and collapse different timelines to a greater and greater degree, to the point where it defies common sense. And this will result in what we actually call a miracle. All right, so this was a bit of a shorter one, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you found it interesting, leave a comment, a like. It helps with engagement. If you want to know more, I have a link in the description to a course that I've made on Teachable, and I will catch you in the next video. I think in the next video or podcast episode, I'm going to actually focus on biology. Take it for a little bit of a spin, a little fresh detour, so we can move away from physics for a bit.